My side hustle is I'm a mental health professional. I'm a licensed therapist in the state of California. And a lot of the work that I do as a therapist is with musicians. I work for Music Cares. And I host a Friday emotional support group that we started at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's because during the pandemic, everybody was like, what the heck's going on? We need to help. We got to figure this out.
My guest today is one of my oldest and dearest friends, Los Angeles studio bass player Paul Ill. I've known Paul for such a long time that I sometimes forget what a heavyweight musician he is, as he's played with a wide variety of great artists both in the studio and on the road. This includes superstars like Tina Turner, Pink, Gwen Stefani, and Alicia Keys, to legends Bob Weir, Mike Love, and producers Michael Lloyd and Linda Perry, among a long list too vast to mention. During the interview, we spoke about how his gear has evolved over the last few years, what it's like playing with a full orchestra, how the studio scene has changed in Los Angeles, and how he brings more to the table than just expert bass playing, and much more. I spoke with Paul from his studio in Los Angeles. Last time we did this was 7 years ago, believe it or not. I just checked. So a lot has changed in that 7 years, and let's start here. Tell me about your gear, what you bring to sessions now, and how that might have changed recently or within that 7 years, because I'm sure you've had a shift in your thinking on this.
Yes, thank you for asking about gear. A few friends of mine and I over the pandemic decided we needed to start a 12-step fellowship called Gearaholics Anonymous because everybody was going a little overboard with gear, which is a relatively benign thing, but it was a joke, and it's turned into like a ongoing joke. 7 years ago, in 2018, I had a completely different set of tools for sessions at my own studio or recording sessions that were done remotely either at my studio or at my home, or for sessions I would do on location when I would bring stuff. Do we need to review? I know what I was using 7 years ago. That was 2018.
Well, just briefly, yeah.
Okay. In 2018,
the differences.
Definitely a P bass with flat wound strings, a P bass with round wound strings, maybe a couple of one or two extra basses just in case. It depends on the needs and what the request of the artist involved. And for signal chain, I would have brought a B15 and maybe one of my 3 pedal boards. Back then, in 2018, I only had the one, we call it the mother of all boards. It's a large pedal board. I didn't have the two, the medium one and the small one I have now. So that was 7 years ago. Nowadays, what I bring is remarkably different. Usually it's a P bass with flat wounds and a P bass with round wounds and maybe one or two other additional basses. Oh, by the way, 7 years ago, I would have brought something for what we call the ooh-ah factor, which is like the keys, dangling the keys over an infant's, stroller or whatever. What do you got? And it probably wouldn't have been a bass. It might be like a weird little, like a stylophone synthesizer or a Nashville tuned guitar, maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that. Or it may be something on my laptop where I could say, hey, are you guys interested? Boom, if we have a minute. Plus, you also don't want to go outside your guardrails with that stuff. So that's 7 years ago. Nowadays, it's definitely P bass with flat wounds, P bass with round wounds. If they're not requesting any other, they're just saying, just show up, we're going to play. I would definitely bring another bass or maybe two that I would choose relative to their needs. I have shown up with that, my 1946K, unannounced with very prominent, like heavy hitting record producers and go, hey, you know what? I have a thought. You want me to try that track on upright just so you have it? Maybe you could build another mix, or something. And they've said, yeah, we have the time, bring it in. Now, I won't do that if my technical abilities are not commensurate with bringing that into the studio. There is stuff that I cannot play on upright that I can play on electric bass. But I also have an NSX Steinberger electric upright bass, which is a lot more facile and a lot more user-friendly. So a lot of times I'll bring that because that's the ooh-ah factor. It's an extra bass. And I've also learned you can kind of read the room right? There may be no interest in a ooh-ah factor at all.
Yeah.
It may be like digression, not charming, right, or whatever. So I bring those. And then for signal chain, I use for an analog amplifier, I will bring my Fat Jimmy Bass Odyssey amp built by Mike Pascal in Marin County, California. I started using these amps. I was introduced to them when I was playing with Bobby Weir in 2018 and 2019 after our last podcast. And the first time I played through one, I was like, holy smoly, what? I looked behind me. What is this? It's at the Mill Valley Block Party. Me, Bobby, and Alex Koford on drums for most of the set. Steve Ferroni had a split. He just said, I got to go. My car's here. He won't. But we were ready. We were waiting for that. But it was a Mike Pascal Fat Jimmy Bass Odyssey. It's basically a copy of a dual showman with the mods that Owsley did for the Wall of Sound in 1974, brought into the 21st century by Mike Pascal. It's the only bass amp I've ever owned where the direct out on the back with an attenuator is post power amp.
Wow.
Preamp and the power amp going to Pro Tools or going to the house or whatever. And at first, it's pretty cool, pretty positive shock value. People go, "Well, that's a big signal in the thing. I got an attenuator here. Just walk around back, turn it down, or I'll turn it down." And then because you get the power transformer.
Yeah.
I think more than the tubes, it's the transformer that they go, "Whoa!" So I really like that, and I will bring an 8-ohm power soak. Right, a bench resistor mounted on a piece of wood with a long speaker cable so that sometimes we just use the amp without speakers.
Yeah.
And then I'll also bring a speaker cabinet, just a few these days. I have thinned the herd like many of our friends. Tim Pierce, I know, has been thinning the herd.
Yeah.
A lot of people. It's, we get older. And also, people don't need big stuff anymore. I'll bring either a Fat Jimmy speaker cabinet. I have one on permanent location out at Matt Sorum's studio out in Palm Springs, which is nothing short of amazing. I keep one out there that he can use all the time for sessions and stuff. That's got a 1x15 EVM 115M in it from the early 70s that's in perfect condition. So the speakers that were very popular in the early 70s, Barry Oakley even had a cabinet with two of them in them, not only an SVT cabinet. They're very warm. They're a bass speaker or a low-end speaker for a PA with a really big magnet, very heavy. And I also have a Fat Jimmy 4x8 modern cabinet, but it's not neodymium. How do you say that?
Yeah, neodymium.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Not a fan yet. I'm sure I could be converted. I'm not that familiar with them. These are standard, and they're 4 8-inch full-range PA speakers in a small, deep box. It sounds great.
Wow. Yeah.
Then I also have a Form Factor cabinet, which is a deep box with two full-range 10-inch speakers in it, which is super punchy, and everybody really loves it. That's a very modern-sounding cabinet.
So your gear, at least some of it, the amplification part of it, has changed a whole lot.
Radically. But here's the really, really big news, where get out your garlic, right? Got your vampire stuff. Get back, stay away. I have a quad Cortex. And I absolutely love it. It's great. I'm a huge fan, and I bring it to everywhere I go, session-wise, along with the analog stuff. And if guys say don't bring anything, I don't bring the big stuff, but I bring the quad Cortex just for me. I love it.
Okay, I'm glad you went there. So you play a wider variety of dates than anybody I know. I mean, you'll do gigs on upright, and live dates you're talking about, gigs on upright, and then you'll be doing fly dates on with orchestras.
Yeah, but not on upright bass, on electric.
Not an upright bass, no, but still.
Yeah.
When you do a fly date now, you're just taking the quad Cortex, right?
Yep. Take one bass and a quad Cortex, and I ask them to just put one thing on the rider, a spare, a jazz bass or a P bass in good shape with round wound strings.
Oh, as a spare, as backup.
Spare, just in case, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have in-ears.
And what?
And I bring my own in-ears. And the drummer, the name of this entity we're speaking about, Bobby's audience, is called Gravel Museum. It's based primarily in Canada and the Northeast. And it's Steve Thashuk and Bradley Thashuk, two brilliant brothers. And they have been on Bobby's podcast. I'm
Yep.
part of their house band for quite a few of their shows. And we do like for example, a Phil Collins Genesis show in front of an orchestra, and we're on silent stage, and even the drummer is playing a Roland electronic drum kit inside a plastic cage, because even the tick, 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 tick of the sticks on the kit is intense because the dynamic range is so broad. The quiet stuff is triple pianissimo, like legit quiet music.
Wow.
But there's so many live microphones around us. The smallest orchestra we play with is 52 piece, and just about everything's mic'd up individually. So it's radical. It's a lot of fun too.
Are you reading the whole time?
Reading?
Yeah.
I read we have 4 shows that I know. I still read about 70% of the shows. I don't know if I'll ever be able to play the Genesis Prague medley by heart from up here, because we don't rehearse enough, to be honest. We rehearse once before each gig, and then it's hit it and quit it, but I treat it like a day gig. Don't get me wrong. 30 days before a show, I'm in my home studio, minimum of 2 hours a day playing the show, just because I need to have that level of confidence. I'm not a guy that can just show up and do that on the fly.
Yeah, you've always been diligent like that.
Well, it's also because of that Talking Heads record, Fear of Music. I don't want fear of music. I don't want to be going like, but I'll tell you the experiences I have in there. Yes, I bring the quad Cortex. We plug in. One channel is the bass model, right? One channel of the quad Cortex is the bass synthesizer for the Genesis Phil Collins show to get the low-end Taurus stuff in some of the songs. On other shows, it's DI and just the amp model. You have the quad Cortex signal chain, but I'm just taking one output off the back of the quad Cortex, and I've got a DI coming off the bass because we don't need the synthesis channel, right? And they only give me 2 inputs into the PA because they have so many inputs coming from the orchestra.
I'm glad you went there for a second. I've never heard you talk about preferred direct boxes. Or do you actually bring your own?
No, because I like to travel light, but I own a few. I'd have to go grab it and look at it. It's custom made by some guy in Japan, and it's awesome. The guys that I got to tell you, I do a lot of stuff with Gary from Amp Shop Bass Exchange on Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood. If I ever needed somebody to travel with me, to just have a pal that was a bass guy to take care of all that stuff. He's so much more. He's an artist in his own right. He's a brilliant bass player. But so many bass players in LA are in and out of his shop all the time, and he stays very current. He got me this preamp, or this direct box. It's got an effects loop in it. It's got tone controls on it, because there was one that was incredibly popular in jam band world that was a one-trick pony that my friend Tim Lefevre has on his board. Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi keep one at their studio, and they insist you record through it. I've never recorded with them, but my friends who know them say they have one on the rig on stage with Tedeschi Trucks. I'm forgetting the name of it. I apologize. So I was grousing about spending $1,200 on a DI that just did one thing, and Gary said, "No, I got you. There's this guy in Japan that builds. It's just as good, and it's more flexible, and it also has an effects loop in it, so you can put your pedal board in it."
Yeah.
So before the quad Cortex, I would fly with that and a pedal board. Now I'm just down to the quad Cortex.
Yeah, it's funny that there's, especially in Nashville, it's a big thing to bring your whole signal chain with you. And again, I'm going there more than anything. The direct boxes were such a big deal, especially for bass players. And, everybody had their own version of it.
Well, at the Bob studio, at the Psychedelic Shack, whom, thanks to you, you've been one of the benefactors of that studio. Bobby is constantly, to his audience, he's constantly loaning, permanent loan. Hey, I don't need this anymore. Hey, this is collecting dust. Why can you make use of this? So thank you for that. I have a direct box that I bought at basically a yard sale, a closeout sale for a rental company. And I don't know the name of it, but it's blue. And it's the generation of DIs that have Jensen transformers in it that everybody used in LA in the late 60s and early 70s. And I'm sorry, I'm not prepared for this. I don't keep pictures of it in my phone or anything. I should, so I could go, oh, wait a minute. But apparently it's the Wrecking Crew direct box after the handmade ones, right?
Yeah. Westlake made a bunch of them. Might have been a Westlake.
Yeah. And then there's another one that a couple friends of mine have they swear up and down it's a clone of whatever they had at Motown in Detroit that they brought out here.
Yeah.
So I know you can definitely go down some direct box wormholes for bass in particular, but for other instruments too.
Well, I always felt it made more of a difference on bass than anything else.
Sure. Yeah.
Where, you got that lowest octave that really made a big difference that You get a cheap box, it doesn't happen like that.
Yeah, and also you see a lot of radial DIs, the green ones. We have one at the studio.
And the radials are great for what they are, especially for the amount of money you spend.
Yeah.
All right. I know you mentioned a number of times a number of physical ailments that come with playing. Would you care to talk about some of those?
Well, I think that's generational. Demographically, I don't know if you're listening.
Well, I don't know about that. You mentioned a couple times about your wrists and how you had trouble with your wrists. And there were times when just playing upright, you'd talk about your elbows that would hurt.
Okay.
So,
what I meant by my comment about it being generational is I didn't have these problems in my 20s or my 30s.
Oh, well, yeah.
Even in my 40s, if I think back. I know many musicians, most particularly drummers, who have had to change their technique as they age, as we progress. I know a guitar player in his 30s who just did a very, very intense, arduous contemporary country residence at a casino in Nashville and can't do the gig with a Les Paul anymore. And he's 35 years old. And he was like, I got to start doing this gig with an SG. The Les Pauls, his Les Pauls are probably pretty light. He's a gearaholic. I doubt his are like boat anchors. He probably made some pretty careful weight choices when he bought his Les Pauls.
Yeah, right.
But for me personally, I have had to change my technique. The first time I had to address it, I addressed it chiropractically. And that was in the 90s, believe it or not. So I was in my 30s and I did a tour of Australia with Wayne Kramer, and I had to wear a wrist thing that you put on your wrist to isolate your thumb when you sleep. And it was misdiagnosed. At the base of my thumbs, if you notice, you can see the protrusions.
Yeah.
I have a congenital birth defect that's on my mom's side of the family, the Romani Polish side of my family. And Ashkenazis get it too, Eastern European Jewish people. There's a bone at the base of your thumb called the trapezium, and it looks like a pyramid. Mine are dissolving, and it gets misdiagnosed early on as arthritis, when it's not. It's actually, they're decalcifying over time. Now, I know a very, very respected, world-famous guitarist who will remain anonymous, who had the same situation going on, and he and I commiserated about it, and he chose to have the surgery on his neck hand first. And he said, don't have the surgery unless you have a wife, girlfriend, partner, boyfriend, husband, medical worker that will be with you 24/7 for 3 months, because you will lose the use of your opposing thumb on one of your hands for 3 months. Ooh. And you can't button your jeans. You can't tie your shoes.
Yeah.
Cooking you can probably get through, but a lot of personal stuff, woo, right? So I chose not to do the surgery. I did interventional stuff with injections, platelet injections, amnio injections. Some of this stuff can be a bit controversial, especially with the ramifications of Roe v. Wade going away and stuff. And I don't want to go down any of those rabbit holes, but I haven't had my injections in quite some time. I've been very stable lately. Now, with respect to the neck and the shoulders, that's another thing too. Playing that upright bass is like wrestling with a gorilla sometimes. Moving that upright bass is sometimes having to deal with a legless grandfather, is what I call it, like getting it in and out of a place. It's like having a handicapped person that you're trying to help. My electric upright bass, my Ned Steinberger, is the cheap version of what Tony Levin plays with King Crimson and Peter Gabriel. Looks like a long, sticky kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That thing is a joy. But on certain stages, like, for example, last weekend to play Arco, like with the bow, this stuff, right? Arco. I had to twist myself like a pretzel, turn the bass, because I was on a really small stage doing a really fun gig with Chan Kinchla, who's been on your podcast recently, from the band Blues Traveler. We have a band called Warhorse. Well, we also do his solo gigs under the name of Chan Gang. And we had a Chan Gang gig, and I was in between the brilliant Andrea Witt, she was playing pedal steel, and the wonderful, equally brilliant Wally Ingram, our drummer, on percussion, on a really small stage in Studio City. And it was like, Arco song. I got to turn this way and then go like this. And then I woke up the next morning and I was like, yeah, you bow like that for 5 minutes. And that's a little weird on the body. I bent myself like a pretzel, and it was all right. In the moment, it was okay. But the next morning I was like, whoa, Youch, right? So there are those things. And I think that those just come with wear and tear on the body. Now, there's a young generation of musicians coming up who are so phenomenally physically adept at playing music. It's pretty amazing. A lot of the YouTubers in particularly can really, really play at a very high level of technical expertise when we're talking about velocity of what they're performing, the tempo of what they're performing, the skill level, and their aspirational level to develop as virtuosos is very high. And I don't know if any of those people are having any problems that other people had generationally before because of the influence of this. It seems like as time marches on, people are able to play a lot more complex parts faster. Right. And that may take a toll on the human body. I don't know.
There's something I read. I actually didn't read the whole article, but there was a headline, and it was basically, I spent thousands of dollars trying to find out what the pain in my side was, and it was the Telecaster. So it was a Telecaster player, and it's a very uncomfortable guitar, which is why I never got into it. And, it hurts your ribs, if you play every night, and that's your gig. And apparently someone just thought, well, I'm having a problem here. And they chased their tail trying to find it. Was the guitar.
Well, I remember you said to me once years ago, real men played Telecaster.
Yeah, that's right. Because of that, it's a physical issue more than anything. Well, it's a tonal thing too, in that you have to make the tone work at whatever you're doing, because, it is kind of high and thin.
Led Zeppelin 1 works for me.
Yeah, it does for me too. Okay, so let's go here. You've played a lot of sessions with a lot of different people over your career, and session work has changed a lot. And part of it is because you get older and there's a different set of producers, but it's also changed just in form. The music is different. The demands are different. Can you go there for a second?
Sure. Okay. Most of the session work I do now is for producers who have established clients that they've been with for a long time, that they're going to know what they're going to get from me. And if we do it at my studio, the Psychedelic Shack, they're coming there to record in that environment the bass. Or sometimes they'll do other parts of their project at our studio because it's cost effective for them. Now, you've had people on this podcast who have more money in headphones than we have in gear at our studio. But it doesn't prevent us from making recordings that have an international reach, right? Yeah. So the frequency of my session work has diminished. The work that I do at home, on my home studio, or at my studio, my location studio with a drum set and everything and a whole lot more outboard gear, sometimes I'll do it there, but I tend to do most of the stuff that I do remotely at home because it's just easier and it's more fun and I can do it on my own. I don't have to drive anywhere to do it. That's changed a lot, where somebody will say, we're going to send you an MP3. It's at 128 BPM. It's in the key of B, and we're going to pay you X amount of dollars and we'd like 3 passes, right? Do your thing. But here's what we did in MIDI that we want you to do note for note, right? So then it becomes a transcription gig, right? And they don't want my input into the track. They want me to play verbatim. But they say, do your thing, do our MIDI thing, right? And then do them both with a different bass or something. Or they might just say, hey, Paul, here's the MP3. Do your thing. We'll deal with it later. And I might do 2 or 3 passes, right? That's for the remote gigs. If somebody's in the room with me, sometimes they might be like, hey, grab your Hofner, or we really like what you're playing, but, they do the producer artist thing. Well, you're playing, it's usually play more, play less, right? Which brings us to one of our favorite new lead singer drummer jokes. What did the drummer say to the lead singer? Okay, do you want this song too fast or too slow? Right? Right. And then with respect to refer back to your tonal thing with the sound of a Telecaster and the difficulty to play it, I've been listening to Keith Richards' book, Life, as an audiobook instead of reading it. I read it many years ago, but I didn't retain what I'm retaining from the audio textbook. And one of the things he talks about in there is his 5-string Macabre, and the sound of that guitar being unique unto itself. It's still a Tele, but it's got a humbucker on it, and how tuning a couple of choices can change the course of your career, right? I have
Did for
friends,
them, yeah, right.
right? I have friends who like the bass player friends of mine, like God bless him, Rick the bass player that was with Joe Walsh forever. Rick the bass player had one P bass with flat wound strings that he never changed. And being that guy changed the course of his career because he was Rick, the bass player, who did that thing. He did it for Joe and whoever else he played for. And he did a lot of stuff that he did that he just wasn't big in self-promoting, and there was no internet back then. And he was a wonderful man and a very, very distinctive bass player. Like, he took the less is more influence. That's my favorite bass player, by the way, less is more.
Yeah, there you go.
He took the less is more thing like as far as a human being can go, like so much space in his playing, right? So to take into consideration, what we're talking about now, how sessions change. Well, another thing people do remember is you give them a bass track and they're going to possibly open up any sort of plugins in Logic or Pro Tools. They've got their universal audio signal chain that they swear by with their SVT model, their UAD model of a limiter, whatever they're using, an LA2A or whatever. Okay. And they're going to take whatever you do and possibly reprocess it and make it their own. They might even reamp it in their own studio, right? We do that all the time. I'll do a track here, and then the brilliant Chris Wanzer, who I share my studio with, who's a brilliant producer in his own right and engineer and artist, a songwriter, he will take something I've done, and I just have learned to delegate, to allow creative people to do what they want with whatever we do, So it's changed a whole bunch in that regard with how we do sessions for people. I haven't been flown to a studio in a different city and parked for a week since 2009. And that happened for me in one era of my career between, like, say, 2006 and 2009. That happened internationally, right? Now, I have friends who still do that. Steve Bailey, who I stay in touch with, he'll be like, oh, I'm in Austin. Oh, I'm in such and such. Or I'm on an NDA. I really can't tell you where I am, but I'm in an international location recording with people, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he still does that. He has a clientele or artists that he collaborates with that still do that. It's not been my path for now, a long time, 15 years.
But I think that's common throughout the industry, though.
Oh, yeah.
I hear that from everybody.
Right.
So
and we're all trying to hope that the Holy Grail gets cracked. There's a thing called Lutefish, Lutefisch, which guarantees next to zero latency within 500 miles, and two people can collaborate. I'm supposed to beta test for that pretty soon. Or no, not a beta test, but a review for a magazine. My friend Garfinkel apparently is doing a review of it for Pro Sound News, and I'm going to be on one end of it, and then somebody 300 to 500 miles away is going to be on the other end, and we're going to explore that for the session. The other thing about sessions is, recently I did some tracks for Bill Ward from Sabbath. I was in his solo band in the 90s. Well, we were at Stag Street Studios, an amazing studio that's still fully operational here in town, with a great API console, big rooms, the whole deal. And on those sessions, it was like the old days. On one 3-minute, 42-second song, we used 2 amplifiers and 3 different basses, right?
The old days, yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't want to try to do Bill Ward's accent. Pooh, that Brummy accent. Pooh,
yeah, right.
Do you mind? Right? But he said, look, great, I love your intro, but now let's play it on a different instrument. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And it was a radically different sound than the verse. And then it was like, well, you and I have talked about this before, how people's minds are expanding. The palette is expanding. Like for example, when Beck Odelay dropped back in the day in the 90s, a lot of people thought, this is weird. There's no continuity here. It sounds like a demo to me. It's recorded in a whole bunch of different places. Where to Beck's ears, it was fine. To his audience ears, it was great. So it was kind of like that. There were 3 very distinctly different bass sounds. And when they mastered it, it's not this continuity of low end that we used to go with when. And then the other thing that we have to swing back to in the gear conversation is a lot of people really, they've got guardrails up and they want a P bass with flat wound strings. They want it really warm. And most of the music they listen to is that. Most of the music they've created that. And if you go outside those guardrails, you're challenging their formula in a way that's not helpful to them or the music or their muse or the song. You shouldn't do that, I believe. If they want you, one of my most famous experiences I had since our last podcast was playing with Bobby Weir. Never recorded with him, but we rehearsed at Mount Tam at his studio a lot, and we recorded the rehearsals, but I've never made any recordings with him that were released. But I did a lot of music with him in 2018 and 2019, and it was unbelievable, the experience. It was so educational and so life-fulfilling and so spiritually uplifting and so revitalizing. And to this day, I offer him a lifetime of gratitude anytime we interact for just completely turning everything on its head for me and revitalizing everything about what I do. But working with Bobby, we did a really great gig. I thought it was awesome. One of our first gigs, and we were taking a picture for this outlet and stuff. And he's so soft-spoken. I go, "Hey, Bobby, that was fun. Awesome gig. Thanks, man." He goes, "Yeah, next time, bring a P-bass." Because I was using a jazz bass with 2 Darkstar pickups on it. Kind of like the Darkstar pickups are the Guild pickups they're like a Honker P90 that Barry Oakley put on his jazz bass back in the early 70s. He took it off he had a Guild Starfire, and he put it on a jazz bass, and it's a very distinctive pickup. But anyway, so the gear thing is that my palette has expanded dramatically, but sometimes people just want a P bass with flat wound strings, and we'll take care of the rest. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they want what they
want.
That's
okay. That's their palette and their muse, and we support that.
Okay, last question, Paul. What don't people know about you that you wish they did?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, circle back to Bill Ward. When I first started playing with Bill Ward in the 90s, he said, "Paul," and then in the rest of his brumming accent, he said, "I'm one of the most misunderstood musicians on the planet. People just think I'm a drummer." Just a drummer. The guy basically invented heavy metal.
Yeah, right.
He said, I'm a very misunderstood person. I'm a songwriter who plays drums. So one of the things about me is I'm a songwriter who plays bass, who's primarily known as a bass player. I have significant stats as a co-writer with a lot of the big divas pre-Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, and Billie Eilish. I mean, I wrote songs with Christina Aguilera, Pink, and these are active copyrights that are still out in the world.
Yeah.
Alicia Keys, which I'm particularly proud of. Courtney Love, mostly women. Linda Perry, of course, who I spent a lot of time with. Juliette Lewis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a songwriter. That's how I make sense of the world around me, through narratives. I don't sing well. I don't have a compelling voice. So I create content, I create music, and I have other people sing it, for the most part. Now, my band with Warhorse, with Chandler Kinchla from Blues Traveler and the great Wally Ingram, and Max Butler on keyboards, with special guests, Nate LaPointe from Cubensis. He used to play with Bobby Womack. He's a badass. And quite often Andrea Witt, our pedal steel violin player friend. In that band, I sing because that idiom is forgiving and it allows for that. And producers can get a reasonable vocal out of me, and then I emulate those vocals live, and it seems to work. But for the music I'm about to release my first solo album as Paul Ill. And I waited far too many days.
Way too long. Yes.
I have a guest singer on that record who sings everything. And I'm under an NDA not to release her name until further notice, because the artist that she works with most frequently is very benign and very positive guy. He may want to have her solo career separate from this. And so she may be able to use her name with me. If she can't, she'll be the singer with no name. And it'll all work out. That's one thing people should know about me. I think another thing that people don't know about me is that I make sense of the world around me through improvisational music and writing songs. And also the narrative, the lyrics are really, really important to me. So when I work on a session with somebody, I ask for a lyric sheet, and quite often they say, "That's refreshing," right?
Yeah.
Because there's a famous scene in that Tom Petty Heartbreaker Speech Party, which, by the way, you can finally stream. I just got an email about it, where they're sitting around him. It's back in the Stan Lynch days, and everybody's got like an 11 by 14 legal pad or their notepads, but Tom's playing them the song and singing it to them like Campfire. We call it Campfire. I coined that. No, I didn't coin the phrase, but I'd say, "Linda, we need to campfire this song. Everybody's got to sit around and listen to you or the artist sing it and play it. We got to hear the lyric better. We got to get into this song. We're not into the story yet. No, we're just playing music. We're not telling a story yet." I think that's something about me people don't know. And I think the third thing that people don't know about me is that I'm a multi-instrumentalist. Quite often on sessions, if it allows for it, I'll go, "Hey, I brought a baritone guitar," or "I'm hearing a keyboard part," or whatever. Right. And it's not an ego thing. It's not to get a second check. It's to serve the muse. If you hear it in your head, I do it all the time with people. And I learned that from Kevin Gilbert. Let's all switch instruments. The late, great Kevin Gilbert. I'd be like, are you kidding me? I can't really play drums. He goes, well, you never know. Just keep a beat for us. Me and Brian want to switch. I don't want to play keyboards. I want to play guitar. That kind of fresh approach, and keep allowing people to flourish outside the box you think they belong in is kind of a very important thing, I think, in creativity. And then the fourth thing is that I'm also, my side hustle is I'm a mental health professional. I'm a licensed therapist in the state of California. And a lot of the work that I do as a therapist is with musicians. I work for Music Cares. And I host a Friday emotional support group. It's not a 12-step meeting. It's emotional support that we started at the beginning of the pandemic. We started a bunch of these meetings on Music Cares website, and we've met over 250 Fridays in a row. And it's because during the pandemic, everybody was like, what the heck's going on? We need to help. We got to figure this out. So I think those are the four things that people probably don't know about me that might be worthwhile to them to know. I mean, it feels good to be able to talk about them because I'm relatively anonymous. I don't really have a brand per se or a footprint that people know these things about, but that's about to change because I'm about to enter into a collaboration on branding myself with a PR firm that came through Bobby's recommendation, and that's Ariel Hyatt. She doesn't know it yet, but I'm about to, we're in discussion, but I pretty much made my decision. I'm going to go with Ariel, and so that the music that I put out in the world gets heard I don't know if it's meant to be heard by 10 people or 10,000, but we'll figure it out.
Very cool. I think that's a good place to stop.
Okay.
Very cool, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.